Simgot has been on a roll recently. The EA500, the EW200, the EW100B, just to name a few. But one thing that they all have in common is they're all dynamic drivers. Where is the hybrid love? Well, we're going to be talking about Simgot's entry back into the hybrid space, the Simgot EM6L. Let's talk about it. Hi, I'm Obi from Obi Audio Reviews, and you are tuned into Obi Reviews Audio, the show where I tell you what I think about some audio gear, and today we are going to be taking a look at the Simgot EM6L. This is an IEM priced at $109 and features one dynamic driver and 4 balanced armatures. So, how well does it compete in the $109 segment that many IEMs have started to compete in recently? And how does it compare to other hybrid sets in this price range? First, let's talk about the unboxing experience. You can watch my unboxing on the cards on the top right, but in short, the unboxing is straightforward yet clean and pretty. You get the Phoenix logo up front and the graph as well as some contact details at the back. They provide you with the IEMs themselves, a nice 2-strand cable, 3 pairs of ear tips, some paperwork, and a plain black carrying pouch. The tips included are the same ones that they've included in the likes of the EA500 and EA200, so you either love it or hate it. And the case is also quite similar to the one that came with the EA500, which I personally love because of how spacious it is. Overall, inclusions could have definitely still be improved, but at least it provides all of the essentials. One of the standout things about the EM6L, at least to me, was the QDC connection. Love it or hate it, Simgot had to go with a QDC connector, as I was informed that they had to go with a smaller connector to accommodate all the drivers inside the shell. Thankfully, the popularity of other brands using QDC connectors means that there is a plethora of aftermarket cables that you can choose from. On that note, the EM6L's include cable The colors of the cable also suits the aesthetics of the EM6L, which I thought was a really nice touch. The IEM itself is made of resin for the inner shell and metal for the faceplate. It is neither too large nor too small, so people with medium-sized ears would The faceplate is quite the fingerprint magnet, but it does look quite sleek and minimalist with the Phoenix logo up front. The inner shell is quite smooth and free from wings, which means it is quite universal, but the nozzle is on the thicker side, potentially to accommodate the balanced armatures that are inside the EM6L. What I took issue with, however, is the lack of a lip on the nozzle that had me going on treasure hunts for ear tips due to how easily they slip off. As for comfort, they are quite comfortable with a universal fitting due to the lack of wings, as I mentioned, but it is not the most snug-fitting IEM due to the aforementioned larger nozzle. Overall, it does feel a little bit cheap, but it is quite sleek and it does feel quite confident in its build quality despite the resin material. It does have some downsides like that thick lipless nozzle and to some that QDC connector, however it is quite solidly built overall. Moving on to the sound, the EM6L has a slight U-shaped sound signature with a little bit of extra emphasis on the treble. It has a pretty decently impactful bass, but not really all that punchy or textured. The mid-range is expectedly a little bit on the more recessed side, so vocals don't really come out or instruments don't really have that authority that some more mid-range centric IEM do, but the treble is definitely quite satisfyingly bright without getting too overbearing or overly harsh in my opinion. As for drivability, I would say that this is an IEM that can be confidently driven off of a smartphone, but as usual, your experience will definitely improve when plugged into at least a dongle DAC, and in my opinion, Plugging this into a more, I would say, neutral source would make the sound considerably better compared to if you plug it into a warmer source, but that's just me. Starting with the bass, it is definitely not as much as the graph shows. There is an elevation and there is a pretty decent amount of impact and rumble, but the mid bass I personally think is a bit lacking in terms of tactility and note definition, where you don't really get the feeling of the bass guitars or the distortion guitars really engaging you into the music with a lot of that tactile or rhythmic feel. Although definitely it is not a bloated or muddy sounding IM in any way whatsoever, and I would say it is a genuinely just really well presented bass presentation for the EM6L. Moving on to the mid-range, I was honestly really impressed with the mids of the EM6L despite being slightly U-shaped. The lower mid-range still has some body and heft to give male vocals and lower octave instruments a little bit more heftiness and a little bit more weight to them. Female vocals sound open, and especially string instruments have this really nice and sparkly tinge that never gets overbearing, but at the same time it is definitely a very satisfying sound when you would listen to pianos or violins or even air instruments in that upper frequencies. It is honestly a really open and very clean mid-range presentation, despite being again slightly U-shaped in the overall sound signature. Moving on to the treble, I was again pleasantly surprised of how smooth yet sparkly or bright the treble presentation of the EM6L is. I would say though, if you are sensitive to treble, you might find the EM6L bordering a little bit too hot or harsh. But for me personally, since I am quite tolerant to treble, I really enjoyed the presentation of treble. That for overall detail, I would say the micro detail retrieval of the EM6L isn't really the, I would say the best, it's not even in its price range. I would say that it focuses more on a smooth, clean, yet still definitely engaging and energetic treble presentation. But again, if you are sensitive to that region, that might be a little bit of a turn-off for you. Moving on to the technicalities, I would say that it is pretty decent for the price. It's not really groundbreaking in terms of technical detail. The separation is pretty clean, but it slightly struggles on more complex tracks, especially when it comes to the lower mid-range to this mid-bass area, due to the somewhat, I guess would say, blunted nature of the notes in that region. But in the upper frequencies, I would say that the separation between, like, say, percussives or string instruments or air instruments is pretty decent again for the price. For imaging and I guess the stage in a way, I would say that it is decently expansive thanks to the somewhat scoop nature of the mid-range. I wouldn't say it's the widest, and I wouldn't say that it's the most natural sounding mid-range for the spacing in between of the vocals and instruments, but it does give you that nice wide sense of stage if you're into something like that. And moving on to the comparisons, we can start off with one of the, I guess, benchmarks for the under 100 that is also a 4BA1DD, the Truthear Hexa. In my opinion, the Truthear Hexa follows a more neutral, more natural sounding timbre and sound signature compared to the EM6L's more fun and bright and I would say engaging sound. And I would say that if you're more into a more natural presentation or a more natural sound, go for the Truthear Hexa. But in terms of overall detail, technicalities, I would say that the EM6L just has a step above the Hexa in, I guess, those regards, and it's just a more fun IEM to listen to, in my opinion. Another IEM that is also a hybrid and is priced at $109 is the Letshuoer Galileo. Now, this is also similar to the Hexa, but in the Galileo's case, it follows a somewhat more Harmon curve similar to the EM6L, but the Galileo, I would say, still follows a little bit more of a neutral, smoother, and cleaner sound compared to the EM6L, but in my opinion, the EM6L still is, I would say, half a step or a step above the Galileo in terms of overall technicalities, as the air region is definitely a little bit choked for the Galileo, whereas the EM6L has a little bit of a better extension in the treble, and I would say that the bass definition is also better on the EM6L compared to the Galileo. But again, if you're looking for something more neutral, much cleaner and smoother, go for the Galileo. If you want something more fun and engaging and I guess a little bit more detailed, go for the EM6L. Moving on to the EA500, also known as my favorite IAM of all time, I would say that they are pretty contrasting type of sound signature despite following a similar curve. The EA500 is more vocal centric, more warmer in overall note weight compared to the EA500, to my ears at least, while the EM6L is definitely more on the fun side, U-shaped, more casual, and I would say overall safer compared to the EA500. So if you're picking between the two, I would say that the EA500 is better if you want something more vocal centric, much brighter, much more eccentric sounding, and if you want something safer but still quite energetic and akin to Simgot's overall target, then go for the EM6L. Now moving on to our last two comparisons, first I want to compare it to its little brother, its baby sibling, the EW200, and I would say that the EW200 is basically a budget version of the EM6L in almost every single way. I would say that the EM6L is better in terms of resolution, in terms of treble detail, in terms of mid-range clarity compared to the EW200, but they're not overly too far off, and I would say that the bass dynamics of the EW200 is, I would say, better than the EM6L. But again, the price range is absolutely massive, and if you were looking for an upgrade to the EW200, the EM6L honestly is probably the perfect upgrade for you. And for the last comparison, I honestly didn't think that I would be comparing the EM6L to this, but I had the opportunity to compare it, and that's the Truthear Zero Red. And the red is, I would say, the benchmark of under 50 neutral targets, and I would say that it is definitely justified in that regard. It is a quite neutral, with a slight, I guess, dullness of the overall sound, which makes it a little bit boring, but understandably, that is kind of the point of the Zero Red, while comparing it to the EM6L, which is a lot more fun, a lot more detailed, a lot airier, a lot more technical, more details, especially when it comes to the treble region. It's understandable that it is a considerably better IAM, but again, they're two completely different tunings or targets that they want to achieve. You would want something neutral, you'd go for the red. You want something more fun and eccentric, you go for the EM6L. To conclude, despite the L and the EM6L, it is far from being an L. It is probably one of the best Simgots I've tried in terms of tuning to date. It is also one of the smoothest U-shaped sounding IAMs that I've tried to date, and it's genuinely just a really well done hybrid, especially for the price. However, this is definitely not a set that you would get if you want something technical, something extremely dynamic sounding, and if you are a mid-head or you like a lot of mid-range clarity and emphasis. This is definitely not the set for you. And that QDC as well as that lipless nozzle might be a turnoff for those who are, I guess, sensitive to those kinds of things, as QDC is, I would say, not the most favorite connection for a lot of people, and the lipless design I've had quite some problems with trying to, you know, plug into the IEM, the tips, and it just fall off as I remove the IEM from my ear. So definitely consider those before you buy. But if you are looking for a smooth, well-refined, but slightly bright and energetic hybrid for $199, well, the Simgot EM6L is the IAM for you. Thank you so much for watching my review on the Simgot EM6L. If you want to check out more Simgot consider subscribing as well. And while you're down there, leave a comment. What do you think about the EM6L? Do you want to get it? Do you not want to get it? What do you like about it? What do you not like about it? Tell me. And also, while you're down there again, check out my socials and also check out the Discord. OB Audio